Hello everyone and welcome. In this video I'm going to show you how to do an independent measures t-test in SPSS. And I'm using version 25 here, but if you have a different version of SPSS, you should find these instructions work just fine for any recent version. Alright, I am doing activity 7-1 from the textbook. And what we're looking at here is we're comparing two groups. A group that received a drug and a group that received a placebo, and then we're looking at their social pain score. So you can read more details about the scenario in the book here, but we have two groups, a drug group and a placebo group, and we're going to record their pain score. Now the first thing we need to do is we're going to label our data file, because right now you can see that drug group has scores of 1 and 0, where 1 was coded to mean they received the drug, and 0 meant that they received the placebo, but it's easier to read your output if you label it as drug and placebo rather than 1 and 0. So to do that, we're going to click on the variable view, and then up by drug group, we're going to go to values, and when the value is 0, we are saying that that is a placebo, and then we click on add, and then when the value is 1, we say that that is the drug. This way our output will be labeled with placebo and drug rather than just a bunch of zeros and ones. Okay. Then you say OK there. Then we can go back to our data view. Okay, so we're going to start by doing our independent measures t-test. To do that, you're going to click on Analyze, and then Compare Means, and then the Independent Samples t-test. Your grouping variable is the independent variable, and here we had two groups. We have, for an independent t, you're always going to have two groups. We have the drug and the placebo. So that goes over into the grouping variable box. Now you'll see that it puts two question marks there. It wants to know which two groups you're comparing, because sometimes you might have 5 groups, but you really only want to compare 2. So we have to click on Define Groups and say we're going to compare group 0 and group 1. Those were our placebo and drug groups. Then just say Continue. And then you'll see the 0 and 1 listed there in parentheses. The test score, or test variables, is our dependent variable. In this case, it was pain score. Okay. Under Options, we're going to leave the confidence interval at 95%, and then just say OK. Okay. When you do that, it'll give you your output for the independent measures t-test. So we have two groups we're comparing, the placebo and the drug. The mean pain score for the placebo was 5.45, and for the drug group it was 4.06. So that's what our t-test is comparing. However, before we decide about which t-test to interpret here, we need to look at the test for homogeneity of variance. So the homogeneity of variance test is testing the assumption that these two standard deviations here are estimating the same population parameter. And so what this Levene's test does is it compares these two values to see if that difference is likely to be due to sampling error or if it's a real difference. And so we look here down below where it says Levene's test for equality of variances, and we see that our p-value is 0.09. Right? And so we're going to take these data as a whole. So there are a couple things. One is that you can end up with a pretty low p-value when you have a large enough sample size. So what we look at is our data as a whole. Our standard deviation is for the two groups are 1.91 and 2.55, which are fairly close together. In general, unless one's like double, much larger than the other one, we're not so worried about this assumption being violated. Likewise, our p of 0.09 here for Levene's test is very weak evidence against the null. So based on this, I'd be confident saying that, these variances seem equivalent. This assumption seems to be met. And so because of that, I'm going to use the equal variances assumed line when interpreting my data. Okay, because my p-value is around 0.09, 0.1, and my two standard deviations are fairly close together. So my t is 2.42. The p for that two-tailed test is 0.019. The difference between the means is 1.387. The standard error is 0.573. And the 95% confidence interval around that mean difference is 0.24 to 2.53. or I can be 95% sure that the true mean difference is somewhere between 0.24 and 2.53. Okay. All right, so you'll note here that you have a mean difference in raw score units, but SPSS does not give that to you in standard units. You don't get a standardized effect size with a confidential interval around that. If you need that, you need to use a different program, and we'll have a different video showing you how to do that in a different program there. All right, if you also want to look at graphs, you can click on Analyze, Descriptive Statistics, and click on Explore. And now our drug group is going to be our factor list. That's our factor is an independent variable. That would be our drug group. And then our dependent list is our dependent variable, which is pain score. Under plots, I'm going to ask for a histogram. And then just say continue. And this will give me histograms for each group, as well as a box plots for those groups. Okay. All right, so that is all you need to know to do activity, or at least to run the analyses in SPSS for activity 7.1. So I hope that helps, and good luck.